The wind screamed through the towering pine trees like a wounded beast. Snow raced across the mountains, covering every trail beneath a blanket of white. The northern forest had become a frozen kingdom where even the strongest wolves searched desperately for shelter before dawn. Hidden among the ancient trees stood a small wooden cabin. Its roof sagged under the weight of fresh snow, and only the warm glow from a single window proved that someone still lived there inside. Liana quietly placed another log into the fireplace. The flames crackled softly, pushing back the bitter cold that crept through every crack in the old walls. She wrapped her thin wool blanket tighter around her shoulders and glanced toward the empty shelves. A small loaf of stale bread, a handful of dried herbs, and one clay pot of soup were all she had left. Winter had never been kind to exiled omegas. But loneliness had been even crueler. Every morning began the same way, silence. Every night ended the same way, memories. Liana slowly walked toward a tiny wooden chest resting beside her bed. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside were 3 tiny blankets. Soft that hands and never used. She gently brushed away invisible dust before folding them once more. "I hope," she whispered, her voice breaking, "wherever you are, someone loved you." A tear rolled down her cheek before she quickly wiped it away. There was no one left to see her cried at, or so she believed. Outside, hidden between the snow-covered trees, 6 enormous white wolves stood perfectly still. Their glowing silver eyes watched the lonely cabin without making a sound. They were not hunting. They were waiting. The oldest among them lowered his massive head toward something lying in the snow. A tiny bundle moved. Another weak cry echoed through the storm. The ancient wolf carefully nudged the bundle closer to the cabin door before lifting his head toward the sky. One by one, every white wolf disappeared into the darkness. Moments later, knock. Not a human knock, a soft scratching against old wood. Liana froze, her heart pounded. No traveler crossed these mountains during storms like this. She slowly reached for the iron poker beside the fireplace. The scratching came again, softer this time. Almost desperate, she carefully unlocked the door. The icy wind burst inside, carrying snow. Across the floor to first. She saw nothing. Then another tiny cry reached her ears. Her eyes dropped. 2 wolf cubs lay curled together in the snow. They were barely larger than puppies. Their white fur had frozen into small icy clumps. 1 cub barely lifted its tiny head before collapsing again. The smaller one didn't move at all. "Oh!" Liana immediately knelt beside them. "Oh, little ones!" She slipped the poker aside and carefully gathered both cubs into her arms. They were frighteningly cold. Their tiny bodies shook uncontrollably. "You're safe now," she whispered. "I won't leave you." She hurried inside, kicking the door shut with her foot. The cabin instantly felt warmer. Liana wrapped the cubs inside her own blanket before placing them beside the fire. She warmed water, mixed herbs, slowly rubbed warmth back into their frozen paws. The smaller cub let out the weakest little whimper. Liana smiled through tears. "There you are. I knew you were still fighting." She dipped one finger into warm goat's milk and gently touched it against the cub's mouth. The tiny creature slowly drank. Then drank again. Its frightened breathing finally began to steady. Hours passed. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, life slowly returned. The larger cub finally opened bright blue eyes. Instead of growling, instead of fearing her, it crawled weakly across the blanket until its tiny head rested against Liana's arm. She laughed quietly. "You trust me already." The cub answered with the softest little whine. Liana stroked its head. "I suppose that means we're friends." She broke the last piece of fresh bread into the soup. Her stomach growled. She ignored it instead. She fed every bite of soft meat to the cubs. Only after both were asleep did she drink the remaining broth, barely enough for herself. Yet somehow, she smiled. They needed it more. The storm finally began to calm. Curious, Liana stepped outside carrying an empty basket. Fresh snow sparkled beneath the moonlight. She expected to find wolf tracks leading toward the forest instead. She stopped breathing. There were only enormous paw prints. Each print was almost twice the size of an ordinary wolf's. She slowly followed them several steps, then they vanished beneath drifting snow. "No ordinary wolves," she whispered. "Who brought you here?" High above the valley, hidden among black cliffs, several pairs of glowing silver eyes watched her. The white royal wolves, none made a sound. Their leader quietly turned away. His task had been completed, far beyond the mountains. Inside a magnificent palace carved from black stone and silver crystal, armored guards opened massive iron gates. The ancient white wolf calmly entered the royal courtyard. Every guard stepped aside. Even battle-hardened warriors bowed their heads. The wolf belonged to only one man, the Alpha King. Inside the grand hall, Alpha King Kael Ashfong stood before a giant map of the northern kingdom, tall, silent, unshaken. His icy blue eyes studied reports of rogue attacks spreading across neighboring packs. A commander approached carefully. "My king." Kael never looked away. "What is it?" "The first guardian has returned." Kael finally turned. The enormous white wolf walked across the polished stone floor before stopping directly before him. The king's eyes narrowed. Something was different. The wolf lowered his head. Snow still clung to his silver fur. But another scent rose above the frost, soft, gentle, warm, a woman's scent. The oldest wolf had allowed someone to touch him. That had never happened before. Kael slowly knelt beside his oldest companion. His hand rested against the wolf's neck. He closed his eyes. The unfamiliar scent became clearer. Pain, kindness, loneliness, hope. All carried within a single fragile fragrance. Kael opened his eyes. "Who did you find?" The ancient wolf simply stared back. Then, for the first time in many years, he turned toward the northern mountains, toward one forgotten cabin, toward one rejected Omega. And without understanding why, the most feared Alpha King in the kingdom suddenly felt that destiny had just knocked on his own door. The first rays of morning sunlight struggled to break through the heavy gray clouds. Snow still covered every branch of the northern forest, turning the world into a sea of silver and white. Smoke curled gently from the chimney of Liana's lonely cabin, disappearing into the icy sky. Inside, warmth slowly returned. The two tiny wolf cubs slept peacefully beside the fireplace, wrapped in the old blankets Liana had sewn years ago. Their breathing was calm now, no longer weak or frightened. Liana knelt beside them with a soft smile. "I think you're both stronger already." The larger cub opened one sleepy eye before letting out a tiny yawn. The smaller one crawled closer until its little nose rested against her hand. She laughed quietly. "So you don't want me to leave?" The cub answered with another soft whine. Liana gently scratched behind its ears. "You remind me of someone." Her smile slowly faded. Someone she had never truly known. Someone she had only dreamed about. She turned toward the old wooden chest once again. Inside were 3 tiny carved wooden wolves she had made while waiting for her own children to be born. She picked one up carefully. "I thought I would watch you grow." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I thought I would hear your laughter." Silence answered her. The cabin suddenly felt much larger than before. Much emptier. The larger cub slowly stood on shaky legs. It walked toward Liana, carrying the little wooden wolf gently in its mouth before placing it back into her hands. Liana froze. Tears filled her eyes. "You don't even know why this matters." She hugged the tiny cub against her chest. "Thank you." Outside, hidden beyond the trees, several pairs of silver eyes watched quietly. The white royal wolves. None of them moved. None of them blinked. It was almost as though they understood every tear falling from the lonely Omega's face. Hundreds of miles away, the royal palace stood proudly above the frozen cliffs. Its towering walls had survived centuries of war. Inside the great hall, ministers argued around a massive stone table. "The rogues grow bolder every week. Our border patrol found another abandoned village. We should strike before spring." None of them noticed that Alpha King Kael remained completely silent. His thoughts were elsewhere. He remembered the strange scent carried home by his oldest wolf. Illness, grief, loneliness. Those emotions still lingered inside his mind. Commander Darius finally stepped forward. "My king." Kael looked up. "Prepare shadow." The commander frowned. "Your battle horse." Kael nodded. "I am leaving the palace." Several advisors immediately protested. "Your Majesty, the northern roads are dangerous. There may be assassins. You should send scouts instead." Kael's voice remained calm. "If my wolves choose someone over me, they have a reason." Silence filled the chamber. Nobody questioned him again. Far below the palace walls, the ancient white wolf quietly waited beside the stable gates. Kael approached him without armor. Only a heavy black cloak covered his shoulders. He rested one hand upon the wolf's massive head. "You've served my family longer than anyone alive." The wolf stared into his eyes. "You've never asked anything from me." A faint smile crossed Kael's face. "But today, you wish for me to follow." The ancient wolf turned toward the northern forest. Without another sound, he began walking. Kael followed. Back inside the lonely cabin, the morning passed peacefully. Liana prepared herbal medicine while the cubs explored every corner of the tiny room. One discovered an old broom. Another chased its own tail until it rolled into a basket. For the first time in years, laughter echoed inside the cabin. Real laughter. Warm laughter. Liana covered her mouth in surprise. "I almost forgot what happiness sounds like." The words escaped before she could stop them. Suddenly, her smile disappeared instantly. Nobody visited her. Nobody. She slowly opened the door. 3 hunters stood outside. Each wore the colors of Moon River Pack, the pack that had banished her. One hunter looked around with disgust. "So this is where the child killer hides." Liana lowered her eyes. "I don't want trouble." Another hunter noticed the wolf cubs. "What are those?" "They're injured." "I found them." The tallest hunter laughed cruelly. "Found them? You steal cubs now." The frightened little wolves immediately hid behind Liana's legs. She stepped forward. "They're only babies. They need care." The hunter reached toward the smaller cub. "We'll take them." Liana's voice became firm. "No." The men exchanged surprised looks. "An omega." Refusing an order. The tallest hunter grabbed her arm roughly. "You don't have the right to keep wolves. You lost that right years ago." The smaller cub cried loudly. Liana immediately pulled the frightened pup into her arms. "You will not touch him." Her voice shook, but she did not step back. The hunter's face darkened. "You dare challenge us?" Before anyone could move, a deep growl echoed through the forest. The sound was unlike anything the hunters had ever heard. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Carried absolute authority. Every bird in the trees suddenly flew away. The hunters slowly turned around. Standing between the towering pines, 6 gigantic white wolves emerged from the snow. Their glowing silver eyes never left the hunters. The largest wolf stepped forward. His shoulders stood nearly as high as a horse. Every hunter's face turned pale. Royal white wolves. The tallest hunter stumbled backward. They belonged to the Alpha King. None of the wolves attacked. They simply stood beside Liana, protecting her, protecting the cubs. The hunters understood the warning. One whispered nervously, "We're leaving." Another nodded quickly. No abandoned omega is worth dying for. Within seconds, all 3 men disappeared into the forest. Silence returned. Liana slowly looked at the enormous wolves surrounding her cabin. They weren't growling anymore. One gently lowered its head toward the frightened cubs. The little wolves immediately ran forward, happily rubbing against the giant guardian's snowy legs. Liana watched in amazement. "They know you." The oldest wolf lifted his eyes toward the distant mountain pass. Far beyond the trees, a lone rider dressed in black had just appeared at the edge of the forest. Alpha King Kael had finally arrived. He couldn't yet see the woman in the cabin, but he could already feel that this journey was about to change not only his kingdom, but his heart forever. The towering white wolves stood motionless around Liana's little cabin, their thick winter fur glowing beneath the pale morning light. Snowflakes drifted gently through the silent forest, yet not a single bird dared to sing. Liana remained frozen at the doorway. The tiny cubs hid behind her legs, peeking nervously around her skirt before slowly stepping toward the giant wolves. Instead of fear, the little cubs wagged their tiny tails. One even stumbled through the snow until it reached the oldest white wolf. The enormous guardian lowered his massive head, gently touching noses with the tiny pup. Liana could hardly believe what she was seeing. "They know you," she whispered. The oldest wolf looked at her with wise silver eyes that seemed almost human. For one strange moment, she felt as if he wanted to tell her something. Before she could take another step, the wolf suddenly lifted his head. His ears turned toward the northern trail. Someone was coming, far beyond the trees. A lone rider guided a powerful black horse through the snow-covered forest. His dark cloak flowed behind him like a shadow. Even the freezing wind seemed to avoid him. Alpha King Kael, the ruler of every northern pack. His sharp blue eyes studied the enormous paw prints left by his royal wolves. "They came this way," he murmured. Commander Darius had begged him not to travel alone. The royal council had warned him of rogue attacks. But Kael trusted one thing above every warning: his wolves. For 20 years they had never chosen the wrong path. If they protected someone, that person deserved to be found. The ancient white wolf's scent still lingered on the snowy trail, mixed with another, a gentle scent, warm herbs, fresh pine, and sadness. Kael had never sensed grief carried so quietly before. Whoever this woman was, she had suffered for a very long time. Back at the cabin, the white wolves suddenly became alert. Every one of them turned toward the forest, their tails lifted, not in aggression, in respect. Liana noticed the change immediately. "What is it?" The oldest wolf released a deep rumble before calmly stepping aside. The others copied him. They formed two perfect lines leading away from the cabin, almost like soldiers welcoming someone important. The tiny cubs became excited. They bounced happily through the snow. Liana frowned. "Who's coming?" The answer arrived only seconds later. Hoofbeats, low, heavy, confident. Each step echoed through the quiet forest. A massive black horse emerged from between the trees. Its rider wore a long black cloak trimmed with silver fur. A polished sword rested across his back. His broad shoulders and calm posture made him impossible to ignore. Even before seeing his face, Liana felt an overwhelming presence. Power, authority, control. The horse stopped several feet away. The rider climbed down without a word. The moment his boots touched the snow, every royal wolf lowered its head. Liana's heart nearly stopped. Only one man in the kingdom received such respect. Her voice trembled. "The Alpha King." Kael slowly removed the hood from his cloak. Dark hair framed a calm, handsome face marked by years of responsibility rather than age. His piercing blue eyes settled on Liana. Neither of them spoke. For several long seconds, the world seemed strangely silent. Kael had expected many things. An ambitious woman seeking power. A mysterious witch. Perhaps even an enemy hiding inside the forest. He found a young Omega kneeling beside two frightened cubs, her hands stained with herbs and medicine. Her dress was worn. Her boots had been repaired countless times. Yet despite obvious hardship, the cubs trusted her completely. His oldest wolf quietly walked to Liana's side. Kael raised an eyebrow. The ancient guardian never stood beside strangers. Never. "What is your name?" His deep voice broke the silence. Liana quickly lowered her head. "Liana. My king. You know who I am. Everyone knows the Alpha King." Kael studied her carefully. "You aren't afraid." She hesitated. "I am. But not because you are king." His expression barely changed. "Then why?" Liana glanced toward the tiny cubs. "I'm afraid someone will take them away." The simple answer surprised him. No request for money. No plea for protection. No attempt to gain favor. Only concern for the helpless creatures behind her. The larger cub suddenly wandered toward Kael. The guards of any ordinary palace would have panicked. Does it? Kael slowly knelt. The tiny cub sniffed his hand. Then looked back at Liana. As though asking permission. She smiled gently. It's all right. The cub immediately climbed into Kael's lap. For what felt like the first time in years. A faint smile appeared on the Alpha King's face. So this is why they came. He softly scratched behind the cub's ears. The little wolf happily wagged its tail. Liana watched with quiet surprise. She had expected the feared ruler to be cold, cruel, distant. Does it? He held the tiny cub with remarkable care. Kael looked toward her once more. My wolves brought these cubs here. She blinked. They're yours. They belong to the crown. Liana immediately lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I never meant to. You saved them. She looked up. What? You fed them. You treated their wounds. You gave them shelter. Kael gently placed the cub back into the snow. You protected what others abandoned. Liana didn't know how to answer. No one had thanked her for anything in years. Before another word could be spoken, the oldest royal wolf suddenly growled. Whoa. Warning. Kael instantly stood. His eyes swept across the surrounding forest. Someone else was watching them. And hidden behind the thick pine trees, a pair of cold golden eyes stared directly at Liana. The mysterious figure quietly disappeared before anyone could give chase. Kael's expression hardened. We're not alone. Liana felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter wind. Somewhere beyond the forest, the past she had tried so desperately to forget had just begun following her once again. The forest fell silent. Even the cold wind seemed to stop between the towering pines. Kael's piercing blue eyes searched every shadow. His hand instinctively rested on the hilt of his sword while the white royal wolves spread through the trees without making a sound. The mysterious watcher was already gone. Only fresh footprints remained, half hidden beneath the falling snow. Kael knelt beside them. They left in a hurry. The oldest white wolf sniffed the trail before letting out a low growl. They know this scent, Kael murmured. It isn't a rogue. Liana felt a knot tighten inside her stomach. You think someone was watching me? Kael slowly stood. I don't think. I know. His calm voice carried no fear. Only certainty. The realization sent a chill through Liana. For years she had believed everyone had forgotten about the rejected Omega living deep inside the forest. Apparently, someone never had. The tiny cubs sensed the growing tension. The smaller one whimpered softly before hiding beneath Liana's cloak. She gently stroked its tiny head. It's all right. I won't let anyone hurt you. Kael watched the simple moment quietly. His warriors often claimed courage belonged only to those who carried swords. Yet the woman standing before him had faced starving winters, loneliness, and hatred. Even now, her first instinct was to comfort someone smaller than herself. Not herself, the cub. The Alpha King found himself asking a question he had not planned. Why do you keep helping them? Liana looked surprised. They're only babies. Most people would think about surviving first. I do survive. She smiled sadly. I survive by making sure someone else doesn't suffer. Those words settled heavily in the cold air. Kael had met queens, nobles, warriors, and elders from every corner of the kingdom. Few possessed such quiet strength. The oldest wolf suddenly walked toward the cabin. He stopped beside the doorway, then looked directly at Kael. Almost impatiently, Kael understood immediately. He wants me to go inside. Liana blinked. My cabin. The Alpha King nodded. I believe my oldest companion has invited me. She looked around the tiny home with embarrassment. It's very small. It isn't worthy of a king. Kael answered without hesitation. A home where life is protected is worthy of respect. Liana lowered her eyes. No one had ever spoken of her home with kindness. She stepped aside. Then, "Please come in." Kael entered quietly. The cabin smelled of pinewood, herbs, and fresh soup. Nothing about it suggested wealth. Everything suggested care. His gaze moved across the room. The shelves were nearly empty. Firewood was stacked with perfect order. Every blanket had been carefully repaired. Nothing had been wasted. His eyes stopped at a small wooden table. 3 tiny bowls rested beside a single larger one. "You expected visitors." Liana followed his gaze. Her face softened. "No, they belong to." She stopped herself. "My children." Silence filled the room. Kael noticed the tiny carved wolves lined neatly across the shelf. Small handmade toys. Blankets folded with impossible care. A little wooden cradle sat untouched in one corner. Years of dust covered it. Yet someone cleaned it every day. The Alpha King slowly walked toward it. "You kept everything." Liana nodded. "I couldn't throw them away. They were all I had left." Kael looked at the empty cradle for a long moment. His voice became quieter. "What happened?" Liana closed her eyes. "I don't know." The answer sounded even more painful than tears. "I never held them. I never learned their names. They disappeared before sunrise." She swallowed hard. "And everyone believed that I abandoned them." Kael turned toward her. "You didn't." She looked up surprised. "My king. I've spent years judging liars. I know what guilt sounds like." He stepped closer. "You grieve. You do not pretend." For the first time, someone believed her. Liana's knees nearly gave way. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. You believe me." Kael held her gaze. "Yes." A single tear escaped down her cheek. Not because she was sad. Because after years of silence, someone had finally listened. Outside, the snow began falling again. The cubs played around the fireplace while the white royal wolves rested around the cabin like silent guardians. One little pup climbed into Kael's lap without hesitation. Another curled beside Liana's feet. The scene felt strangely peaceful, as though they had known one another for years. The oldest wolf suddenly stood. His ears lifted. A sharp growl echoed through the room. Kael was already on his feet. "What is it?" The wolf rushed outside. The others followed instantly. Liana hurried to the doorway. The giant wolves stared toward the western ridge. Smoke. Dark smoke rose above the distant trees. Too much smoke. Not from a fireplace. From fire. Kael narrowed his eyes. "Someone is burning the forest." Liana's heart raced. "There are wolf dens near those hills. And traveling families," she added. Without another word, Kael fastened his cloak. "We're leaving." Liana immediately grabbed her medicine satchel. "I'll come." Kael frowned. "It's dangerous. There could be injured cubs." She looked him straight in the eyes. "I won't let them face this alone." The Alpha King studied her determined expression. Every sensible reason told him to order her to stay. Yet another part of him, the part that trusted his wolves, knew she would go whether he allowed it or not. Finally he gave a single nod. "Stay close to me." Liana smiled softly. "I will." The ancient white wolf lowered himself. Without hesitation, the smaller cub climbed onto his broad back. The other wolves formed a protective circle around Liana. Kael mounted his black horse. For the first time in many years, the Alpha King rode into danger not with an army, but beside a forgotten Omega whose courage had already begun changing something deep inside his guarded heart. Neither of them realized that the fire burning beyond the western ridge was no accident. Far away, hidden inside the shadows of an abandoned watchtower, Luna Seraphine watched the rising smoke with a satisfied smile. "So, the Alpha King finally found her." She slowly turned toward a group of scarred rogue wolves waiting behind her. Good. Now make sure neither of them returns. The rogues bowed their heads. Within moments, they disappeared into the snow. And for the first time since Liana's exile, death itself began following her footsteps. The thick column of black smoke climbed into the gray winter sky like a warning from the moon goddess herself. Kael urged his black stallion forward. Faster! The powerful horse charged through the snow-covered forest while the white royal wolves ran beside him with incredible speed. Liana struggled to keep up, her boots sinking into the deep snow. The oldest white wolf noticed immediately. Without hesitation, the giant guardian slowed and knelt before her. Liana shook her head. I can't. The wolf looked directly into her eyes, almost insisting. Kael glanced over his shoulder. Ride with him. I've never ridden a wolf. You have now. His calm voice left little room for argument. Liana carefully climbed onto the ancient wolf's broad back. His thick white fur felt warm despite the freezing air. As soon as she settled herself, the wolf rose effortlessly. Within seconds, they were racing through the forest. The speed stole her breath away. Snow exploded beneath powerful paws. Towering trees blurred past. The tiny rescued cubs rode safely between the older wolves, protected on every side. For the first time since her exile, Liana felt protected instead of abandoned. Nearly an hour later, the smell of smoke became unbearable. Burning pine, charred wood. Kael raised one hand. Stop! Everyone froze. The forest ahead looked wounded. Several ancient trees had collapsed. Black smoke drifted between broken branches. Small fires still burned beneath fallen logs. Liana jumped down from the white wolf. Oh no! Scattered across the snowy ground were signs of desperate escape. Tiny paw prints, broken carts, dropped blankets, children's toys. Someone had fled in terror. Faint cry. Liana's head turned instantly. Did you hear that? Another weak cry echoed beneath a fallen tree. Without waiting for permission, she ran toward the sound. Liana! Kael called after her, but she was already moving. She dropped to her knees beside the burning debris. A heavy tree trunk had trapped a young wolf beneath it. The pup couldn't have been older than 6. His silver-gray fur was covered in soot. One small leg was pinned beneath the massive log. Every breath came with painful whimpers. Liana's heart broke. It's all right. I'm here. The frightened child looked at her with terrified golden eyes. Please. My mama. His tiny voice trembled. Liana gently brushed ash from his face. We'll find her. I promise. The little wolf nodded weakly. Then another cry echoed somewhere deeper inside the smoke. Kael's expression darkened. There are more. The Alpha King immediately gave orders. Darius was right. This wasn't an accident. He looked toward his wolves. Search every shelter. The white royal wolves disappeared without hesitation. Kael turned to Liana. Can you free him? She examined the trapped leg carefully. No. The log is too heavy. Kael stepped forward. Move back. He crouched beside the enormous fallen tree. His fingers wrapped around the frozen trunk. Muscles tightened beneath his cloak. With one powerful movement, the massive log lifted. Liana quickly pulled the frightened pup into her arms. The moment Kael released the trunk, it crashed back into the snow with a deafening boom. The child cried out in pain. Liana immediately examined the injured leg. It's broken. She carefully opened her medicine satchel. We need splints. Without being asked, Kael drew his sword. One clean strike split a nearby branch into perfect pieces. Liana smiled faintly. Thank you. Together they wrapped the broken leg with surprising speed. The frightened child looked between them. You! He sniffled. You're not from my pack. Liana shook her head. No. Then. Why did you save me? She gently smiled. Because someone needed to. The young wolf suddenly threw his arms around her neck. I was so scared. Liana held him close. You don't have to be afraid anymore. From several steps away, Kael quietly watched the scene. He had seen warriors earn loyalty through strength, kings through power. But this woman, she earned trust through kindness alone. No wonder his wolves kept returning to her. A distant howl shattered the silence. The oldest white wolf emerged from the smoke. Behind him walked 3 frightened wolf children. Each was covered in ash. Each looked exhausted. The youngest could barely stand. Liana immediately rushed toward them. Oh, you poor little ones. One girl flinched as Liana approached. Her face was streaked with tears. Please. Don't send us back. Liana knelt. I won't. My father. The little girl sobbed. He stayed behind. Another child pointed toward the burning trees. There are still wolves trapped. Kael looked toward the blazing forest. The fire was spreading faster. Falling branches crashed around them. Smoke grew thicker every minute. One of Kael's wolves suddenly returned at full speed. The giant guardian stopped directly before the Alpha King. Blood stained his white fur. Kael's face hardened. You found them. The wolf lowered his head once. Far beyond the burning trees. More survivors were trapped. But they weren't alone. The ancient wolf let out a deep warning growl. Kael understood immediately. The rogues are still here. Liana looked up sharply. They're attacking survivors. Kael nodded. They started this fire. A heavy silence settled over the clearing. The frightened children instinctively gathered around Liana. She wrapped her arms around them. We can't leave them. Kael looked toward the smoke where distant howls echoed once again. Then he looked back at the trembling children clinging to Liana. Finally his decision was made. He drew his sword. Its silver blade reflected the firelight. His voice became cold enough to freeze the winter air. No, we won't leave anyone. The white royal wolves lifted their heads together. One by one, they answered their king with thunderous howls that echoed across the burning forest. Hidden somewhere inside the smoke, a pair of cruel golden eyes watched the rescue unfold. The mysterious figure smiled. So, the Alpha King chose her. A scarred rogue stepped closer. What now? The figure's smile widened. Now we make him regret it. The rogue nodded before vanishing into the flames. Unaware of the deadly trap closing around them, Kael, Liana, and the white royal wolves charged deeper into the burning forest, where the greatest test of their courage had only just begun. The burning forest roared like a living monster. Flames climbed from one ancient pine to another, swallowing branches with frightening speed. Thick black smoke rolled through the trees, making every breath painful. Ash drifted across the snow like black rain. Kael tightened his grip around the hilt of his sword. His sharp blue eyes swept across the burning valley. Stay together, he ordered. No one walks alone. The white royal wolves immediately spread into a protective formation. 4 wolves surrounded the frightened children. 2 remained beside Liana. The oldest guardian stood at Kael's side, watching every shadow between the burning trees. Liana looked down at the frightened wolf pups clinging to her cloak. The little gray pup whose leg she had treated was trembling. Will the fire reach us? He whispered. Liana gently brushed the soot from his face. Not while we're here. But what if the bad wolves come back? She forced a comforting smile. Then they'll have to face all of us. The child slowly looked toward Kael. The Alpha King stood like an unshakable mountain in the middle of the flames. For the first time since the attack, the little wolves began to believe they might survive. Suddenly, a desperate howl echoed from deeper inside the forest. Then another. Then another. Liana's heart skipped. Those aren't rogues. Kael nodded. Families. Without another word, he sprinted toward the sound. The white royal wolves followed instantly. Liana hurried behind them, refusing to stay back. They crossed a fallen bridge and entered a clearing where destruction covered every inch of the ground. Several wooden homes had burned to ashes. Broken wagons lay overturned. Scorched blankets and children's toys were scattered across the snow. Near the center of the clearing, an injured she-wolf struggled to protect 3 tiny cubs beneath her body. She growled weakly as flames crept closer. Liana gasped, "Oh, moon goddess!" The injured mother tried to stand but immediately collapsed again. One of the cubs cried loudly, "We have to help them." Kael didn't hesitate. "You too," he commanded, pointing to his wolves. "Clear the path." The giant white wolves rushed forward. With their massive bodies, they pushed burning branches aside, opening a narrow path through the fire. Kael charged straight into the flames. The heat struck him instantly, but he never slowed. He reached the injured mother and carefully lifted the heavy timber pinning her shoulder. The she-wolf cried out in pain. "It's all right," Kael said calmly. "You're safe now." Behind him, Liana knelt beside the tiny cubs. Each one was terrified. One had burns on his small paws. Another could barely open her smoke-filled eyes. Liana wrapped them inside her warm cloak. "I've got you. You're not alone anymore." The smallest cub buried his face against her shoulder. "I thought everyone left us." Liana hugged him tighter. "Never. I promise." Just as they prepared to leave, a sharp whistle cut through the smoke. Kael instantly looked up. Down! An arrow flew from the trees. It narrowly missed Liana before striking a nearby trunk. Another arrow followed. Then another. The rogues had been waiting. Hidden among the smoke, dark figures stepped into view. Scarred warriors. Cruel smiles. Golden eyes filled with hatred. Their leader laughed. "So, the great Alpha King protects abandoned pups now." Kael stepped in front of Liana. His voice became dangerously quiet. "Leave." The rogue grinned. "Or what? You'll kill us." He pointed toward the frightened children. "You can't fight while carrying all those little burdens." The rogue pack burst into mocking laughter. Liana felt the cubs shaking against her. She whispered softly, "Close your eyes." The children obeyed. Kael slowly raised his sword. Its silver blade reflected the firelight. "I warned you." The rogue leader sneered. "Attack." Everything exploded into motion. The first rogue lunged forward. Before he reached Kael, the Alpha King moved. One clean strike sent the attacker's weapon spinning into the snow. A second rogue charged from the side. One of the white royal wolves leaped through the air, knocking him several feet backward. Another rogue aimed his spear toward the frightened children. Liana saw it first. "No!" Without thinking, she threw herself between the weapon and the cubs. The spear ripped through her cloak, grazing her shoulder before burying itself in the frozen ground. Pain shot through her arm. But she never let go of the children. Kael saw everything. Time seemed to stop. His calm expression vanished. For the first time, pure fury filled his eyes. "You touched her." His voice was almost a whisper. Yet every rogue froze. The air itself seemed heavier. The white royal wolves lowered their heads. Even they recognized the terrifying change in their king. The rogue leader laughed nervously. "She's only an Omega." Kael took one slow step forward. "No. She is under my protection." Another step. "And you." He pointed his sword directly at the rogue leader. "Have declared war against the crown." The rogue's smile disappeared. Before he could react, Kael attacked. His movements were impossibly fast. Steel flashed through the smoke. One by one, rogue weapons crashed into the snow. Those who could still stand fled into the burning forest. The leader stumbled backward, clutching his wounded arm. "This isn't over." Kael didn't chase him. Instead, he returned immediately to Liana. Blood stained her sleeve. His expression softened the moment he reached her. "You're hurt." She looked down at the shallow wound. "It's only a scratch. You shielded them." She smiled weakly. "They're children. They needed someone." Kael stared at her for several long seconds. Then, without speaking, he carefully tore a strip from his own royal cloak and wrapped it around her injured shoulder. Liana blinked in surprise. "My king! You risk your life too easily." She looked at the frightened cubs resting safely in her arms. "They're worth it." Kael tied the bandage securely. His fingers paused for just a moment. Then he quietly said, "So are you." Liana's heart skipped. Before either of them could say another word, the oldest white royal wolf suddenly let out a powerful howl. Every wolf in the forest answered. The sound rolled across the mountains like thunder. Kael immediately looked toward the distant cliffs. His expression hardened once again. The ancient wolf had discovered something, or someone, far beyond the smoke. Hidden high above the burning valley, a cloaked woman watched everything with cold satisfaction. Luna Seraphine slowly lowered the enchanted crystal she had been using to spy on them. "So," she whispered, "the Alpha King has begun to care for her." A cruel smile spread across her face. "Perfect. The deeper he falls, the more it will hurt when he learns who she truly is." She crushed the crystal in her hand. Far below, Kael unknowingly looked toward the same cliff. He could feel unseen eyes watching them, and deep inside one thought became impossible to ignore. This attack had never been about the village, had always been about Liana. The last echoes of battle faded into the frozen mountains. Snow drifted gently over the blackened remains of the village, covering broken weapons and burned timber alike. The fire was finally dying, but the smell of smoke still clung to the air. Liana tightened the bandage around her shoulder. The wound stung every time she moved, yet she refused to complain. Around her, frightened wolf children huddled together beneath warm blankets. Some had stopped crying. Others still stared silently into the flames, too shocked to speak. The white royal wolves stood around them like silent guardians. Not one wolf rested. Not one lowered its guard. Kael slowly walked among the survivors. He knelt beside an elderly wolf whose breathing had become shallow. "Can you hear me?" The old wolf nodded weakly. "They came before sunrise." His voice cracked. "They burned everything." Kael's jaw tightened. "Did you recognize them?" The old wolf closed his eyes. "They hid their faces." "But..." He struggled for another breath. "They followed orders." Kael exchanged a quiet glance with the oldest white royal wolf. This attack had been planned. Someone powerful had sent those rogues. Someone who wanted fear to spread. Liana moved from one survivor to another. She cleaned burns, wrapped wounds, comforted frightened children, used every herb inside her medicine satchel until only a few leaves remained. A little she-wolf no older than 5 quietly tugged on Liana's sleeve. "Miss." Liana smiled gently. "Yes. My brother won't wake up." Her tiny voice trembled. Liana immediately followed her toward a broken wagon. There lay a young wolf boy, perhaps 8 years old. His breathing was faint. His face was pale beneath layers of ash. Liana gently checked his pulse. Still alive, but barely. She looked toward Kael. "He needs clean water." Without hesitation, Kael turned to his warriors. "Bring fresh snow." "No." Liana shook her head. "Not snow. We need running water." One of Kael's wolves immediately lifted his head before disappearing into the forest. Less than a minute later, the giant guardian returned carrying a leather water pouch taken from a nearby abandoned camp. Liana blinked in surprise. "You understood." The wolf quietly lowered the pouch beside her. Kael watched the exchange. "They understand more than most people believe." Liana carefully washed the boy's face before preparing another herbal mixture. She slowly poured a few drops between his lips. "Come on. You can fight." The children watched without blinking. Even Kael remained silent. After several long moments, the boy coughed. His eyes slowly opened. The little girl burst into tears. "Brother!" She wrapped her arms around him. "I thought you left me." The boy weakly hugged her back. "I'm still here." Liana smiled with relief. The children around her suddenly cheered. One tiny cub clapped excitedly. Another hugged Liana's arm. "You saved him. You really saved him." Liana laughed softly. "I only helped." "No." The elderly wolf sitting nearby slowly stood despite his injuries. "You gave us hope." His words spread quietly through the survivors. One after another, the frightened families began looking at Liana differently. Not as an exile, not as a forgotten Omega, but as someone who had chosen to save strangers when she had every reason to walk away. Kael noticed every reaction. For years he had ruled through justice, through strength, through law. Yet what he witnessed today could never be commanded. Respect, real respect, earned only through compassion. Commander Darius' old words suddenly returned to his memory. The strongest ruler is not always the one wolves fear, but the one they choose to follow. Looking at Liana, Kael finally understood. The peaceful moment didn't last. One of the white royal wolves suddenly emerged from the trees carrying something carefully between his teeth. A torn piece of black cloth. He laid it before Kael. The Alpha King picked it up. His expression immediately changed. The fabric carried a silver emblem stitched into one corner. A crescent moon wrapped by twisting vines. Liana stared at it. "I've seen that symbol before." Kael looked at her. "Where?" She frowned, trying to remember. "My old pack." It was hidden inside Luna Seraphine's private chambers. Kael's eyes narrowed. "You are certain?" She nodded slowly. "I cleaned her room many times. She never let anyone touch that banner." The oldest white royal wolf released a deep growl. Kael slowly folded the cloth. "So, the rogues truly weren't acting alone. Someone connected to Seraphine had armed them. Ordered them." The realization made his blood run cold. Before Kael could speak again, a frightened scout came running through the snow. "My king!" The young warrior dropped to one knee, breathing hard. "We found more survivors." Kael stepped forward. "How many?" 23. The scout swallowed. "But they refused to leave." "Why?" "They're trapped inside the old chapel. The bridge leading there collapsed." Liana immediately looked toward the distant valley. Smoke still drifted from that direction. "If the fire reaches the chapel, they'll never escape." Kael turned toward the broken cliffs. The only remaining path crossed a narrow ridge already weakened by the fire. One wrong step, and everyone would fall into the frozen river below. His commanders would have waited, calculated, found another route. But there wasn't time. The flames were spreading too quickly. Kael looked at Liana. "You stay here." She shook her head before he even finished speaking. "They'll need a healer. It's too dangerous. They're someone's children." Her answer came without hesitation. "I won't let them face this alone." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Kael sighed quietly. A faint smile touched the corner of his lips. "I suppose I've already learned that changing your mind is impossible." Liana smiled back. "So I've been told." The Alpha King turned toward the white royal wolves. "Prepare to move." The giant wolves immediately formed around the survivors. Within moments, the rescue party began climbing toward the burning ridge. Far above them, hidden among the snow-covered cliffs, a pair of golden eyes watched every step. Luna Seraphine lowered her hood. Her cold smile slowly returned. "Good," she whispered into the wind. "Walk exactly where I wanted you to." Behind her, a pile of loose rocks rested above the narrow mountain path. One push, one perfectly timed push, would bury the Alpha King, Liana, and every survivor beneath thousands of tons of stone. Seraphine quietly raised her hand. Her waiting rogues understood the signal. The trap was ready. And neither Kael nor Liana had any idea that every step they took was leading them straight into it. The climb grew steeper with every step. A narrow mountain path wound around the frozen cliff like a thin ribbon of ice. Below, a raging river crashed against jagged rocks hidden beneath sheets of snow. Above them, smoke drifted across the peaks, hiding the pale afternoon sun. The white royal wolves moved first. Their powerful paws tested every patch of ice before allowing the survivors to follow. Kael walked at the front of the line. His sword remained drawn. His sharp blue eyes searched every ledge. Behind him came Liana, carefully guiding the frightened children. "Hold my hand," she whispered to the smallest cub. "If you slip, I'll catch you." The tiny cub nodded. "I trust you." Liana smiled warmly. "You don't even know me." "I don't have to. You smell safe." Her heart softened. No one had called her safe before. For years, she had only been called weak. High above the trail, Luna Seraphine watched from behind a wall of stone. The corner of her lips curled into a cold smile. "They're almost there." Beside her stood 6 scarred rogues. One rested both hands against an enormous boulder already loosened by the fire. Another tightened the ropes holding several smaller rocks in place. Seraphine calmly raised one finger. "Not yet." Her golden eyes followed Kael. "The king first. Then the Omega. And if the children fall." She shrugged without emotion. "They're only witnesses." The rogues nodded. None questioned her. Further down the mountain, the oldest white royal wolf suddenly stopped. His ears lifted. A deep warning growl rolled from his chest. Kael froze instantly. "What is it?" The wolf stared toward the cliff above them. His silver eyes narrowed. Kael looked upward. Everything appeared still. Too still. Even the wind had gone quiet. His instinct screamed. "Everyone!" He slowly raised one hand. "Move back." Before anyone could react, crack, the sound exploded across the mountain. A massive boulder broke free. Then another. Then dozens more. The mountainside came alive. "Rockslide!" One survivor screamed. Chaos erupted. Enormous stones thundered down the narrow path, smashing trees and sending clouds of snow into the air. Kael's voice cut through the panic. "Run!" The white royal wolves sprang into action. 2 wolves pushed frightened children toward a small cave in the cliffside. Another shielded an elderly survivor with his own body as rocks crashed around them. Liana grabbed the smallest cub and pulled him close. "This way." A heavy stone slammed into the path behind her. The ground shook violently. More rocks rained from above. Suddenly, a frightened little girl slipped. The icy trail crumbled beneath her feet. She screamed as she slid toward the edge of the cliff. "Liana!" Without thinking, Liana let go of the others. She threw herself forward. Her fingers caught the girl's wrist just as both of them reached the edge. Half of Liana's body hung over the freezing river below. The little girl cried uncontrollably. "I'm falling." "No." Liana tightened her grip. "You're not." Another section of ice cracked beneath them. Kael spun around. His heart stopped. "Liana!" He rushed toward the cliff. A giant boulder crashed between them, blocking his path. Dust and snow exploded into the air. "Liana!" He could barely see her. Only her outstretched arm clinging desperately to the frightened child. The cliff continued breaking apart. Liana's injured shoulder burned with unbearable pain. Her fingers slowly began slipping. The little girl looked into her eyes. "You should let go." Liana shook her head. "No. But you'll fall too." "I said." She gritted her teeth. "I won't let you face this alone." Kael reached the boulder. Without hesitation, he drove his shoulder against it. The massive stone didn't move. Again, nothing. One of the white royal wolves stepped beside him. Then another. Then another. Together they pushed. The boulder shifted. Only an inch. Kael growled through clenched teeth. Again. With one tremendous effort. The stone rolled aside. Kael sprinted toward the cliff. Liana's grip was weakening. Her fingers were stained with blood. The little girl's tears froze on her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Liana smiled despite the pain. "You never have to apologize for needing help." The ice beneath them shattered. Both began falling. Kael lunged. His hand caught Liana's wrist at the very last second. The force nearly pulled him over the edge. The oldest white royal wolf immediately bit gently onto Kael's cloak, anchoring him. The remaining wolves dug their claws deep into the frozen ground. "Hold on," Kael shouted. Liana looked up. "I have her. I know. I'm not letting go." Slowly, painfully, Kael pulled them upward. Every muscle in his body trembled. The wolves held firm. At last, Liana rolled safely onto solid ground, still holding the little girl tightly against her chest. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The child burst into tears. Liana hugged her close. "You're safe. It's over." The little girl buried her face against Liana's shoulder. "I knew you'd come." Kael knelt beside them. His breathing was still heavy. For the first time in many years, fear remained visible in his eyes. He looked directly at Liana. "You almost died." She lowered her eyes. "I couldn't leave her. You nearly sacrificed your own life." Liana gently brushed snow from the little girl's hair. "If saving one child costs me everything." She smiled softly. "Then it was worth it." Kael stared at her in silence. Every lesson he had learned about strength suddenly felt incomplete. This woman possessed a courage greater than warriors twice her size. Not because she sought glory, but because protecting others came naturally to her. The oldest white royal wolf quietly approached Liana. The giant guardian gently lowered his head until it rested against her shoulder. One by one, every royal wolf followed. They surrounded her in complete silence. The survivors watched in amazement. An elderly she-wolf whispered, "They've accepted her." Another nodded slowly. "I've never seen the royal guardians bow to anyone except the king." Even Kael noticed. His oldest companion had never shown such devotion to another soul. Something ancient was happening, something no one fully understood. Just then, a young scout came racing up the mountain. "My king!" He dropped to one knee. "We reached the chapel." Kael immediately stood. "How many survivors?" 23. The scout smiled through exhaustion. "They're alive." A wave of relief swept through the group. Children laughed. Parents embraced one another. Some fell to their knees, thanking the moon goddess. Liana closed her eyes with gratitude. Every life saved felt like a small piece of her broken heart healing. But high above the mountain, hidden behind shattered rocks, Luna Seraphine watched the rescue with growing anger. "They survived," she hissed. One rogue lowered his head. "What are your orders now?" Seraphine's eyes darkened. "If rocks cannot kill her." A cruel smile slowly returned. "Then the truth will." She turned away from the cliff. "Prepare the next move. The Alpha King is already beginning to trust her. And soon, I'll make him believe she betrayed him." Far below, Kael helped Liana to her feet. Neither of them knew that the greatest danger ahead would not come from claws, swords, or falling mountains. It would come from a lie powerful enough to tear two hearts apart. The chapel bells had long since fallen silent. Only the cold mountain wind moved through the broken stone walls as Kael led the survivors across the final ridge. The old chapel stood proudly against the cliff, scarred by fire but still standing. Its wooden doors were blackened with soot, and smoke drifted through shattered windows. For the frightened families trapped inside, it looked like hope itself. The moment the heavy doors opened, dozens of exhausted wolves rushed outside. Children ran into the arms of their parents. Mothers collapsed in tears. Fathers dropped to their knees, thanking the moon goddess. The frozen mountain echoed with cries of relief instead of fear. Liana stood quietly near the entrance. She smiled as another little family found each other. This was why she never stopped helping. Not because anyone rewarded her, but because seeing broken hearts become whole again made every hardship worth enduring. A young mother approached, carrying an infant wrapped tightly in a faded blanket. She bowed deeply. "My lady." Liana quickly shook her head. "Please don't bow." The woman smiled through tears. "You saved my son. I have nothing else to give except my gratitude." She gently placed the sleeping infant into Liana's arms. The tiny baby stirred for only a moment before peacefully falling asleep against her chest. Liana's breathing caught. The familiar warmth. The tiny heartbeat. It awakened memories she had buried for years. Grown babies. The ones she had never been allowed to hold. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She kissed the infant's forehead gently before returning him to his mother. "Take good care of him." "I will." The woman smiled. "Because of you." From several steps away, Kael watched everything in silence. He had expected the rescued families to thank him. Every grateful pair of eyes looked toward Liana, not because she was powerful, because she had stayed beside them when they were afraid. Commander Darius would have called it impossible. Respect like this could never be forced. Had to be earned. The oldest white royal wolf quietly sat beside Kael. The Alpha King rested one hand upon the ancient guardian's head. "You knew." The wolf looked toward Liana. "You knew long before I did." The giant wolf closed his eyes, almost agreeing. Kael looked back toward the woman comforting frightened children. "My father once told me, the wolves always recognize a true heart before people ever can." His father had been right. Inside the chapel, Liana continued treating the wounded. She carefully replaced old bandages, applied fresh herbs, checked burns. Every patient received the same gentle smile. Every frightened child heard the same reassuring words. "You're safe now." Snow began falling again. The storm had returned. Commander Darius finally arrived with reinforcements from the capital. Nearly 50 royal warriors marched into the valley. The commander immediately bowed. "My king." Kael nodded. "You took longer than expected." The southern pass collapsed. Darius looked around the ruined village. His expression became grim. So the reports were true. He noticed the survivors gathering around Liana, then quietly asked, "Who is she?" Kael answered without hesitation. "Liana. The Omega my wolves chose." Darius followed the king's gaze. He watched Liana kneel before an elderly wolf whose hands shook from the cold. She wrapped another blanket around his shoulders before helping him drink warm broth. The old wolf smiled gratefully. Darius frowned. "She doesn't look dangerous." Kael's eyes remained fixed on Liana. "No. But someone believes she is." That exact moment, far away inside Moon River Pack, Luna Seraphine stood before a polished silver mirror inside her private chamber. A frightened messenger knelt nearby. "My Luna. The mountain trap failed." "I know. The rogues have returned." "I know. They said the Alpha King." "I said." Seraphine's voice turned dangerously quiet. "I know." The messenger lowered his head even further. The room fell silent. Seraphine slowly smiled. Not with happiness, with calculation. If force cannot separate them. She picked up an old wooden box resting upon the table. Inside lay 3 tiny silver bracelets. Each one was made for a newborn pup. She traced one bracelet with her finger. Lies succeed where swords fail. She looked toward another waiting servant. "Bring Elder Malric." The servant hesitated. The elder who witnessed Liana's trial. Exactly. Within minutes, an old wolf entered the chamber. His fur had turned completely gray. Fear filled his tired eyes. You wished to see me. Seraphine walked around him slowly. You remember the rejected Omega? His shoulders stiffened. Liana. You testified against her. I did. She smiled. And tomorrow. You will do it again. The elder's face turned pale. But the Alpha King is involved now. Seraphine stepped closer. If you tell the truth. She leaned toward his ear. Your entire family disappears. The old wolf's knees weakened. You wouldn't. She looked into his frightened eyes. Wouldn't I? Silence answered. Finally. The elder lowered his head. I understand. Seraphine smiled once more. Excellent. The next stage had begun. Back at the chapel. Evening slowly settled across the mountains. Large fires burned safely inside stone circles while survivors shared simple meals. Liana quietly sat alone near the edge of the camp. She watched snowflakes drift through the darkening sky. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. His footsteps approached behind her. Oh. He carried 2 wooden cups filled with hot herbal tea. Without speaking, he handed one to her. She accepted it with both hands. Thank you. They sat together in comfortable silence. The firelight reflected softly in the snow. After a long moment, Kael finally spoke. My wolves trust very few people. Liana looked into her cup. I'm honored. They chose you. She smiled faintly. I think they simply pity me. Kael shook his head. No. They respect courage. Liana looked at him. I'm not brave. You walked into a burning forest. You faced armed rogues. You nearly fell from a mountain. And each time, his voice became quieter. Your first thought was someone else. She didn't know how to answer. No one had ever described her that way. Kael looked toward the fire where rescued children laughed together. They're alive because you refused to give up. A soft blush warmed Liana's cheeks. The silence between them no longer felt awkward. Felt peaceful. Then suddenly, the oldest white royal wolf lifted his head. His ears twitched. A deep growl rolled through the camp. Every royal wolf stood at once. Kael immediately rose to his feet. What is it? The ancient guardian stared toward the southern road. Several riders were approaching through the falling snow. Their banners carried the silver crescent of Moon River Pack. Liana's smile disappeared instantly. Her face became pale. She recognized those banners. And deep inside, she already knew they had not come to bring peace. The peaceful sounds of the camp disappeared. Laughter stopped. Conversations faded. Even the rescued children looked toward the southern road as the distant sound of horses echoed through the snowy valley. Kael's expression hardened. The white royal wolves silently formed a protective wall around the camp. No one had ordered them. They simply knew. Liana slowly stood. Her fingers tightened around the warm wooden cup until her knuckles turned white. I know those banners, she whispered. Kael looked at her. Moon River Pack. She nodded. They're the pack that exiled me. The Alpha King noticed something he had never seen before. Liana wasn't trembling because she feared for herself. She was looking at the children behind her. She feared they would be caught in another conflict. Moments later, nearly 20 riders entered the clearing. At their front rode Beta Ronan, a broad-shouldered wolf with silver armor marked by the crest of Moon River Pack. Beside him rode Elder Malric. His gray fur had aged even more since Liana had last seen him. The moment his eyes met hers, he immediately looked away. Guilt flashed across his face. Liana noticed. Something wasn't right. Beta Ronan climbed down from his horse. Without greeting anyone, he spoke loudly enough for the entire camp to hear. We have come for the criminal. The rescued families looked at one another in confusion. Kael stepped forward. There is no criminal here. Ronan pointed directly at Liana. Her. Silence swept across the camp. Liana lowered her eyes. The old pain returned instantly. The whispers, the accusations, the hatred, it all came rushing back. Kael's calm voice cut through the silence. "State your accusation." Ronan unfolded an old scroll. "By the authority of Moon River Pack, we accuse Liana of abandoning her newborn cubs, bringing death upon innocent wolves through forbidden moon magic, and stealing royal wolf cubs for unknown purposes." Gasps spread through the survivors. The rescued children looked at Liana in disbelief. One little girl tugged gently on her sleeve. "That's not true." Liana couldn't answer. The memories hurt too much. Ronan continued. "Our witnesses are prepared to testify." He turned toward Elder Malric. The elderly wolf slowly stepped forward. His entire body shook. Kael watched him carefully. "Speak." Malric swallowed hard. "I." He looked at Liana. She simply stared back. There was no anger in her eyes, only sadness. That kindness made his guilt even heavier. He remembered the frightened faces of his grandchildren. Seraphine's threat echoed inside his mind. If he told the truth, his family would die. Lily. He lowered his head. "I witnessed Liana abandon her children." The words felt like poison. Liana quietly closed her eyes. She had expected this. Hurt. The camp became restless. Several strangers whispered among themselves. Maybe the stories were true. "I heard she was cursed." Why would an elder lie? Liana didn't defend herself. She never had proof. Kael turned toward her. "Look at me." She slowly lifted her eyes. "Did you abandon your children?" "No." Her answer came immediately. Without hesitation. Without fear. Only heartbreak. Kael nodded once. "I believe you." Every voice around them stopped. Even Ronan looked surprised. "My king," he protested. "You cannot ignore sworn testimony." Kael's gaze never left Liana. "I've ruled long enough to recognize truth." He finally turned toward Ronan. "A frightened witness is not the same as an honest witness." Elder Malric flinched. Kael had noticed. The Alpha King slowly walked toward the elderly wolf. "You've been looking at the ground since you arrived." You cannot meet her eyes. "Why?" Malric's breathing became uneven. "I." Kael took another step. "Who threatened you?" The old wolf's knees nearly gave out. "I." Ronan quickly interrupted. "The elder owes you no explanation." Kael's icy blue eyes shifted toward the beta. "That was not directed at you." The camp fell completely silent. Liana quietly approached the trembling elder. Everyone expected anger, bitterness, accusation. "Is it?" She gently placed a blanket over his shaking shoulders. "It's cold." The old wolf stared at her in disbelief. You're helping me." She smiled sadly. "You look frightened." His eyes filled with tears. After everything he had done, she still showed him kindness. His heart broke. "I." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry." Ronan immediately shouted, "Elder!" But it was too late. Years of guilt finally overwhelmed him. He fell to his knees before the entire camp. "I lied." The words echoed across the valley. "I lied all those years ago." Every survivor froze. Ronan's face turned pale. Malric buried his face in his trembling hands. "Luna Seraphine forced me. She threatened my family. I never saw Liana abandon anyone. I never even saw her children." The camp exploded into shocked whispers. Liana stood completely still. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. Not because she had finally been believed, but because someone had finally spoken the truth. Ronan stepped backward. "He's confused. He's old. He doesn't know what he's saying." Kael slowly turned toward him. His voice became colder than the winter wind. "You've just accused my witness of madness." Ronan swallowed. "I." Kael continued walking. Each step carried quiet authority. First your elder lies. Now he suddenly tells the truth. You expect me to believe this is coincidence? No one answered. Kael stopped only a few feet away. You came here hoping I would hand Liana over. Ronan remained silent. The Alpha King's expression became unreadable. Instead of raising his voice, he spoke softly. That frightened everyone even more. Listen carefully. He pointed toward Liana. From this moment forward, she stands under the direct protection of the crown. A wave of surprise swept through every survivor. The white royal wolves lifted their heads proudly. Ronan's face lost all color. My king! If anyone threatens her again. Kael's eyes became ice. They threaten me. No one dared speak. Liana looked at Kael in complete disbelief. You didn't have to do this. He faced her. Yes, I did. Justice delayed is still justice owed. For the first time since losing her children, someone had not only believed her. Someone had stood before an entire crowd and defended her. The warmth she felt wasn't relief alone. It was hope. A hope she thought had died years ago. Far beyond the snowy valley, hidden behind the trees, a black raven landed on a frozen branch. A tiny silver ring was tied to its leg. The bird spread its wings and disappeared into the night. Hours later, inside Moon River Pack, the raven landed on Luna Seraphine's window. She untied the message and read only a single sentence. The Alpha King has claimed Liana under crown protection. For the first time in years. Seraphine's confident smile disappeared. She slowly crushed the message in her hand. So, she whispered, the game has finally begun. Her golden eyes darkened with hatred. If I cannot destroy the Omega. She turned toward a locked iron chest hidden beneath her bed. Inside rested an ancient silver necklace wrapped in black cloth. A necklace stolen 20 years ago. A necklace that could reveal the greatest secret in the kingdom. Then, I will destroy the Alpha King's heart instead. The night settled quietly over the mountain camp. The firelight danced across the fresh snow while exhausted survivors finally rested after the longest day of their lives. Children slept beneath thick blankets. Mothers held them close, afraid that if they let go, the nightmare might begin again. But sleep never came to Alpha King Kael. He stood alone near the edge of the camp, overlooking the endless white mountains. The icy wind tugged gently at his black cloak. Behind him, the white royal wolves rested in silence. All except one. The oldest guardian slowly approached his king. Kael rested a hand on the wolf's broad head. You've been trying to tell me something. The ancient wolf looked toward Liana's tent. You've trusted her from the beginning. The wolf closed his eyes. Kael sighed softly. I've ruled this kingdom for 15 years. I've judged thousands of wolves. But I've never met someone like her. The ancient guardian suddenly released a quiet rumble. A warning. Kael frowned. You think danger hasn't passed. The wolf slowly turned toward the dark forest beyond the camp. His silver eyes remained fixed on the shadows. Someone was still watching. Inside her small tent, Liana quietly stitched another tear into her worn cloak. The rescued cubs slept peacefully nearby. One tiny gray pup had refused to leave her side. He was curled against her blanket, softly snoring. Liana smiled. You've decided to adopt me, haven't you? The little cub twitched his ears without waking. She gently brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Her thoughts drifted toward Kael. She remembered the way he had stood before everyone. She stands under the direct protection of the crown. No one had ever defended her before. Not her old pack. Not the elders. Not even those who once called themselves friends. Yet the most feared Alpha King in the north had believed her without asking for proof. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. Liana. She recognized the voice immediately. Come in. Kael stepped inside. He carried a small wooden box. I hope I'm not disturbing you. She shook her head. Not at all. His eyes drifted toward her injured shoulder. How is the wound? It hurts less. You should still rest. She smiled. You're beginning to sound like a healer. A faint smile touched Kael's face. I'm trying. The unexpected joke surprised both of them. For a brief moment, they simply laughed. The heavy weight that had followed them for days seemed lighter. Kael placed the wooden box beside her. I brought something. Liana carefully opened it. Inside were fresh herbs, clean bandages, small bottles of healing oil. Her eyes widened. These are royal medicines. They belong to the palace. They belong to those who need them. She looked up. My king. You've already done enough for me. Kael slowly shook his head. No, I haven't. Silence settled between them. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, the tiny fire warmed the tent with a gentle glow. Kael noticed the small wooden chest beside Liana's bed. The lid was slightly open. 3 tiny blankets rested inside. He quietly looked away. He didn't wish to reopen old wounds. But Liana noticed. I still keep them. Kael met her eyes. I know. I tell myself. She stared into the fire. That maybe somewhere they're warm. Maybe someone loved them. Her voice cracked. Maybe they didn't spend their last moments alone. Kael remained silent. There were no words strong enough to heal that pain. Is it? He slowly sat beside her. Not as a king. Simply as another lonely soul. My mother lost a child before I was born. Liana looked at him in surprise. She never spoke about it. But sometimes. He smiled sadly. I'd hear her singing to an empty room. Liana felt tears fill her eyes. She never stopped being a mother. Kael nodded. No. And neither did you. Those simple words shattered the walls around her heart. Liana covered her face. Years of hidden sorrow poured out all at once. I couldn't even hold them. She whispered through tears. I don't know their faces. I don't know if they cried. I don't know if they were frightened. Kael gently placed his hand over hers. You loved them. That is what they would remember. She looked at him. How can you be so certain? Because. His voice remained calm. Love leaves a scent stronger than memory. The tiny gray cub suddenly woke. He stretched lazily before climbing into Liana's lap. To Kael's surprise. The little cub reached one tiny paw toward him. Liana smiled through her tears. I think he wants you too. Kael carefully extended his hand. The cub immediately curled against both of them. Liana laughed softly. He's decided we're sharing. Kael chuckled. I suppose we have no choice. For the first time in many years, the Alpha King forgot about war. Forgot about politics. Forgot about enemies. For a few peaceful moments. He simply enjoyed the warmth of a quiet family that didn't yet realize it was becoming one. Outside the camp, Commander Darius quietly approached the oldest white royal wolf. The ancient guardian stood motionless beneath the falling snow. Darius folded his arms. I've served Kael since we were boys. You've served him since before he was born. The wolf looked at him silently. I've never seen him smile like that. The old guardian gently looked toward Liana's tent. Darius followed his gaze. So, you approve? The wolf slowly lowered his head. Darius laughed quietly. Well, I suppose your judgment has never been wrong. Then, the wolf's ears suddenly lifted. His relaxed posture vanished. A low growl rolled through his chest. Darius immediately drew his sword. What is it? The wolf stared toward the frozen tree line. Several shadows moved between the pines. Too quiet. Too organized. Not animals. Warriors. Darius narrowed his eyes. They're back. Far beyond the camp. Hidden beneath the trees. A dozen cloaked figures knelt before a hooded woman. Luna Seraphine slowly stepped forward. Her golden eyes gleamed beneath the moonlight. She looked toward the camp where Liana's tent glowed softly in the darkness. "So," she whispered, "the Alpha King already visits her tent." One rogue smiled cruelly. "Shall we attack now?" Seraphine shook her head. "No." Swords failed. Fear failed. She slowly removed an ancient silver necklace from beneath her cloak. Moonlight reflected across its delicate surface. The same necklace that had disappeared 20 years earlier. The same necklace that had once belonged to a newborn royal cub. Seraphine smiled. "This," she whispered, "will destroy everything." The rogues stared at the necklace in confusion. None of them understood its true meaning. None of them knew that the tiny silver pendant carried the first piece of a secret capable of changing the fate of the Alpha King, Liana, and the entire northern kingdom forever. The moon hung high above the northern mountains. Its silver light covered the camp in a peaceful glow, hiding the danger that crept silently through the surrounding forest. Most of the survivors were asleep. The rescued cubs dreamed safely beside warm fires. Only the white royal wolves remained awake. Their glowing silver eyes scanned every shadow beyond the camp. They were waiting. Commander Darius stood beside the camp's outer watch post. His hand rested firmly on the hilt of his sword. The oldest white royal wolf remained beside him, staring into the darkness. Neither moved, neither spoke. A single branch snapped. Darius narrowed his eyes. There! Several dark figures slipped between the trees before disappearing again. Watching, counting, waiting. Darius quietly signaled 2 royal guards. "Don't engage. Report only." The guards disappeared into the forest without making a sound. The ancient wolf remained completely still. Then his ears twitched again. This time, he turned toward Liana's tent. Inside the tent, the little gray cub slept peacefully across Liana's lap. Kael remained seated beside the fire. Neither of them had noticed how much time had passed. Outside, the wind whispered softly against the canvas walls. Liana carefully folded the tiny blankets back into the wooden chest. "I always wondered," she spoke quietly, "if they ever celebrated birthdays." Kael looked at her. "I imagined they would." She smiled sadly. "I used to bake little honey cakes every winter. Even though..." She laughed softly through tears. "There was no one to eat them." Kael's heart tightened. "You never gave up." "I couldn't." She looked toward the sleeping cub. "A mother's heart doesn't know how." Silence settled again. Comfortable. Until. The tiny cub suddenly lifted his head. His ears stood straight. A soft growl escaped his throat. Liana frowned. "What's wrong?" The cub jumped down and hurried toward the tent entrance. Every white royal wolf stood at attention. The camp had changed. The peaceful feeling had vanished. Kael slowly rose. "So they've made their move." At the edge of the forest, the 2 royal scouts returned. One carried an unconscious rogue over his shoulder. The prisoner was thrown before Kael. The man's black cloak was torn. His face was hidden beneath a hood. Darius pulled it away. The rogue remained silent. Kael crouched before him. "Who sent you?" No answer. The rogue smiled instead. "You'll never stop her." Kael's eyes narrowed. "Her. So there is a woman behind this." The rogue laughed. "You already know her." Liana felt her stomach twist. Kael remained calm. "What does she want?" The rogue looked directly at Liana. "She wants the Omega to remember." Before anyone could react, the rogue suddenly bit down on something hidden inside his mouth. A small glass capsule shattered. Foam appeared at the corner of his lips. Darius lunged forward. "No!" But it was too late. Within seconds, the rogue collapsed lifeless into the snow. Silence spread across the camp. Liana stared in horror. He chose death. Kael stood slowly. "No." He was prepared for it. Darius searched the body carefully. My king. He removed a small leather pouch tied beneath the rogue's cloak. As it, only one object remained. A silver coin. Its surface carried the same strange symbol Kael had found on the burned battlefield. A crescent moon wrapped in twisted vines. Kael's expression darkened. The same emblem. Liana nodded slowly. I told you. I saw it inside Seraphine's chambers. Kael slipped the coin into his pocket. Then we're closer than ever. Before anyone could speak again, a frightened scream echoed from the center of the camp. My baby! Liana ran instantly. A young mother knelt beside an empty blanket. Her tiny infant had vanished. The entire camp erupted into panic. My son! Please! Someone help! Liana grabbed the woman gently. When did you last see him? I only closed my eyes for a moment. Kael's voice thundered across the camp. Search everywhere. The white royal wolves exploded into action. Within seconds they disappeared into the forest. Liana looked around desperately. Tiny footprints, leading away from the camp. Without hesitation, she followed them. Liana! Kael called, but she was already running. The footprints led through fresh snow toward an abandoned hunter's trail. The moonlight barely reached the narrow path. Branches scratched against her cloak. Her injured shoulder throbbed with every step. She refused to slow down. The tiny prints suddenly disappeared beneath a fallen pine tree. Liana looked around. Nothing. Soft cry. Very close. She dropped to her knees. The infant had become trapped beneath tangled branches. He wasn't stolen. He had simply crawled away while frightened during the commotion. Oh! Liana carefully reached inside. It's all right. I found you. The baby immediately stopped crying the moment she lifted him into her arms. She smiled with relief. There you are. Behind her. Twigs snapped. Liana turned. A hooded figure stood only a few steps away. His face remained hidden. He wasn't holding a weapon. He quietly tossed something into the snow. Tiny silver bracelet. Then he disappeared into the darkness before Liana could follow. Moments later, Kael and the white royal wolves arrived. Liana! He stopped the moment he saw the baby safe in her arms. Relief flooded his face. You found him. She nodded. But... She looked down at the object resting in the snow. I found something else. Kael picked up the tiny bracelet. His heartbeat slowed. The bracelet was old, beautifully crafted, and engraved with a royal crest that had not been used for nearly 20 years. The oldest white royal wolf approached slowly. The giant guardian lowered his nose toward the bracelet. To everyone's astonishment, he gently touched the bracelet, and immediately walked to Liana. Without hesitation, he rested his head against her shoulder. Kael looked from the bracelet to the wolf, then back to Liana. The ancient guardian had just recognized something. Something impossible. Something connected to the distant past. Far away, hidden beyond the trees. Luna Seraphine watched everything unfold. A cruel smile crossed her face. Good, she whispered. Take the first clue. Follow it. It will lead you exactly where I want you to go. But for the very first time, she failed to notice one important detail. The oldest white royal wolf wasn't confused by the bracelet. He remembered it. And deep within his ancient memories, the truth had already begun waking. The silver bracelet felt strangely warm in Kael's hand. Snow continued falling around the camp, yet the ancient metal refused to grow cold. The royal crest engraved upon its surface shimmered beneath the moonlight. Kael turned it over carefully. On the inside, very small letters had been carved into the silver. He narrowed his eyes. The next letters had almost disappeared with time. His heartbeat slowed. Liana. She stepped closer. My name. Kael nodded. It looks incomplete. He gently brushed away years of dirt. The full engraving slowly appeared. For Princess Liana, blessed by the moon. Silence fell across the camp. Commander Darius frowned. Princess. Liana stared at the bracelet. I've never seen this before. The oldest white royal wolf released a low rumble. His silver eyes never left the bracelet. Almost as if he remembered the tiny wrist it had once belonged to. Kael carefully wrapped the bracelet inside a clean cloth. No one speaks about this. Darius looked surprised. My king. If this truly belonged to Liana. Kael glanced toward the surrounding forest. Someone has been hiding the truth for a very long time. Liana shook her head. There must be some mistake. I've never been a princess. I grew up in a servant's cottage. My parents were ordinary wolves. Kael studied her quietly. Were they? She hesitated. Her childhood memories suddenly felt strangely incomplete. She remembered her mother. She remembered laughter. She remembered warm bread baking during winter. But before that, nothing. Almost nothing. Only broken flashes. No. A silver necklace. Lullaby. Then darkness. Liana pressed her fingers against her temples. My head. Kael immediately stepped closer. What happened? She closed her eyes. I remembered something. What? A song. But I don't know why. Before anyone could continue, the youngest rescued cub came running toward Liana. His eyes were wide with excitement. Miss Liana. She smiled gently. What is it? We found something. The little cub grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the old chapel. Several children had gathered near the broken altar. One little girl pointed toward the cracked stone floor. We heard scratching. Kael joined them. The oldest white royal wolf immediately lowered his head toward the damaged stones. He began digging. One powerful paw. Then another. Within moments, loose stones rolled aside. Hidden beneath the altar, a narrow staircase appeared. Cold air drifted upward from the darkness below. Commander Darius slowly drew his sword. A hidden chamber. Kael nodded. No one moves until we know what's inside. The ancient white royal wolf looked directly at Kael. Then calmly walked into the darkness. The others followed without fear. Kael looked at Liana. Stay close. She nodded. I always do. The staircase led deep beneath the mountain. The air became colder with every step. Ancient stone walls surrounded them. Old symbols had been carved into the rock centuries ago. Liana ran her fingers gently across one faded carving. A wolf, she whispered. And a child. Kael examined another symbol. Crown. Surrounded by 7 white wolves. Commander Darius frowned. I've seen this before. Where? In the oldest royal history books. They called them. He paused. The 7 guardians. Kael exchanged a glance with the oldest white royal wolf. The giant guardian remained completely calm. As if he had walked these halls before. At the end of the passage stood an enormous stone door. Unlike everything else around it, the door remained untouched by time. Its silver markings still shone brightly. At its center rested a single handprint. Beneath it were ancient words written in the old wolf tongue. Darius slowly translated aloud. Only blood protected by the moon may enter. Silence followed. Kael stepped forward first. He placed his hand against the stone. Nothing happened. Darius tried. Still nothing. The other warriors attempted one after another. The ancient door remained closed. Liana quietly watched from behind them. I don't think. She hesitated. It wants warriors. Kael looked toward her. What do you mean? I don't know. It just feels. She placed one hand against her chest. Like it's waiting. The oldest white royal wolf slowly walked beside her. Then gently nudged her toward the door. Liana blinked. You want me to try? The giant guardian lowered his head. Kael watched carefully. I trust him. Liana slowly stepped forward. Her heart pounded. I don't understand any of this. She carefully lifted her trembling hand. The moment her fingers touched the ancient handprint, the entire mountain shook. A brilliant silver light burst across the chamber. Ancient runes blazed to life. The heavy stone door groaned loudly before beginning to open. Everyone stared in stunned silence. Commander Darius whispered, "Impossible!" The massive doorway slowly parted. Beyond it waited an untouched chamber hidden for generations. Dust sparkled in the silver light. Ancient banners hung from the walls. At the center of the room stood a marble cradle carved with wolves and moonflowers. Beside it rested a beautiful silver chest. Its lid carried the same royal crest engraved on Liana's bracelet. Kael slowly looked toward her. "You said you were never here." Liana could barely breathe. "I wasn't. I've never seen this place." Yet deep inside, something felt painfully familiar. As if part of her heart had finally returned home. The oldest white royal wolf quietly approached the marble cradle. The ancient guardian lowered himself onto one knee. To everyone's complete astonishment, the remaining royal wolves did the same. One after another. Every guardian bowed before the empty cradle. Commander Darius stared in disbelief. There. He swallowed hard. Paying respect. Kael had never seen such behavior before. Not even inside the royal palace. Not even before the throne. Only one explanation remained. Whatever had once rested inside that cradle had been more important than a king. Liana slowly walked toward the silver chest. Her hands trembled. She reached for the lid. Kael stepped beside her. "Be careful," she nodded, then gently lifted it open. As it, wrapped in soft blue cloth, lay an ancient diary. Faded royal seal. A second tiny silver bracelet. Identical to the one found in the forest. Liana picked it up with shaking fingers. 2 bracelets, made for 2 newborn cubs. Her breath caught. "There were," she whispered. 2. Before anyone could answer, a folded letter slipped from beneath the diary and landed softly on the stone floor. The wax seal had never been broken. Across the front, written in elegant silver ink, were the words, "To whoever finds Princess Liana, protect her before the moon's betrayer returns." Every heartbeat in the chamber seemed to stop. Far away, inside Moon River Pack, Luna Seraphine suddenly looked toward the northern mountains. The smile vanished from her face. "They found it," she whispered. "They actually found the sanctuary." Her hands trembled with something she had not felt in years. Fear. Because she knew exactly what waited inside that ancient diary. And if Kael read even its first page, the lies she had built for 20 years would begin to crumble. No one moved. The ancient letter rested on the stone floor, untouched, as if the chamber itself had been waiting decades for this single moment. The silver light from the glowing runes reflected across Liana's trembling face. Kael slowly bent down. His fingers carefully lifted the sealed letter. The wax crest carried the image of a white wolf standing beneath a full moon. Commander Darius inhaled sharply. "My king. I've only seen that royal seal in the oldest palace records." Kael nodded quietly. "So have I." He looked toward Liana. "If this letter truly mentions you, then everything we thought we knew may be wrong." Liana could barely breathe. "My whole life," she whispered, "has been a lie." Very carefully, Kael broke the ancient wax seal. The old parchment unfolded with surprising ease. Though faded by time, the elegant handwriting remained clear. Kael began reading aloud. "If these words are ever found, then the Northern Kingdom has already fallen into darkness." Silence filled the hidden chamber. "My daughter, Princess Liana, has been taken from the palace to protect her from the one we once trusted." Liana's knees weakened. Kael immediately steadied her before she could fall. She hardly noticed. Every word echoed inside her heart. Kael continued. "The moon's betrayer walks beside us wearing the face of loyalty. Commander Darius frowned. The Moon's Betrayer. I've heard that title before. Kael continued reading. The 7 White Guardians know the truth. Everyone looked toward the royal wolves. The oldest guardian remained perfectly still, almost as if he had been listening to familiar words. When my daughter is grown, the guardians will find her. They will bring her home. Liana slowly looked toward the ancient wolf. Tears filled her eyes. So, she whispered, you weren't bringing me abandoned cubs. You were bringing me back. The oldest white royal wolf gently rested his forehead against hers. The answer needed no words. Kael finished the final lines. Trust no one wearing the crescent vine. Protect the princess. The kingdom depends upon her surviving. The chamber fell completely silent. Commander Darius slowly lowered his sword. My king. The crescent vine. He looked toward the silver coin they had taken from the rogue. The same symbol. Kael nodded. The rogues. The burned village. The false accusations. It was all connected. Liana stared at the letter. My parents. They weren't ordinary wolves. Kael looked at her gently. No. They died protecting you. A tear slipped down her cheek. They loved me. They really loved me. For years she had believed she had been unwanted, abandoned, forgotten. No. She finally knew the truth. Her parents had sacrificed everything so she could live. Commander Darius carefully opened the ancient diary. Its leather cover had cracked with age. The first pages described peaceful years inside the royal palace. Then the writing suddenly changed. Became hurried, fearful. One passage caught his attention. My king. He looked toward Kael. You need to hear this. Kael stepped closer. Darius read aloud. Lady Seraphine has demanded access to the royal nursery again. The queen refuses. I fear Seraphine seeks more than influence. Liana frowned. Seraphine. She was alive back then. Darius nodded slowly. If this diary is genuine, she has been part of the palace since before you were born. Kael's expression darkened. Much longer than anyone believed. Darius turned another page. His face slowly lost all color. My king. You should read this yourself. Kael accepted the diary. His eyes moved across the faded words. He stopped. His breathing became slower. His hands tightened around the pages. Commander Darius immediately noticed. What is it? Kael looked toward Liana. His voice was barely above a whisper. The diary says. He hesitated. The princess wasn't born alone. Liana's heart pounded. What do you mean? Kael slowly looked down at the pair of silver bracelets resting inside the chest. There were twins. The room became deathly quiet. 2 bracelets. 2 newborns. 2 royal children. Liana stared at the second bracelet. My sibling. She whispered. I had a brother. Kael slowly nodded. The diary doesn't say. The next page is missing. Everyone searched the chest. The torn edge of the diary showed where several pages had been ripped away years ago. Someone had removed them deliberately. Someone who never wanted the truth to be found. Suddenly, the oldest white royal wolf growled. Not softly, not as a warning, as a command. Every royal wolf instantly turned toward the tunnel entrance. Kael drew his sword. They're here. A loud crash echoed through the staircase. Stone shattered. Dust filled the passage. One frightened royal guard stumbled into the chamber. My king. He was covered in blood and ash. We're under attack. Before anyone could answer, several black smoke bombs rolled down the stairs. The chamber disappeared beneath thick gray smoke. Children screamed outside. Royal guards shouted. Steel clashed against steel. Kael immediately grabbed Liana's hand. Stay beside me. I can't see. Neither could he. The smoke burned their eyes. The white royal wolves roared as dark figures charged into the sanctuary. Hidden among the chaos, one masked rogue slipped directly toward the silver chest. He ignored everyone else. His target was the diary. The rogue reached inside. But before his fingers touched it, the oldest white royal wolf slammed into him with terrifying force. The attacker crashed across the stone floor. The diary slid through the smoke. Liana saw it. Without thinking, ran. Another rogue lunged toward her. "You'll never have it." Liana dove across the floor. Her fingers closed around the diary just as a blade struck the stone inches from her hand. She rolled away, clutching it tightly against her chest. Kael reached her a heartbeat later. He cut the attacker's sword in half with one powerful strike. "No one touches her." His voice echoed like thunder. The remaining rogues hesitated. Then a whistle echoed through the smoke, their signal to retreat. Within seconds, every surviving attacker disappeared back into the darkness. Silence slowly returned. Only the sound of heavy breathing remained. Kael turned toward Liana. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No." Then she looked down. The diary was still safely in her arms. "We still have it." The oldest white royal wolf approached quietly. His muzzle was streaked with blood, but his silver eyes remained calm. He gently nudged the diary, almost as if reminding them. Its secrets mattered more than anything else. Far away, inside her private chamber, Luna Seraphine listened as another wounded rogue delivered the news. They escaped. The diary remains with the Alpha King. For the first time in decades, Seraphine's hand trembled. "So," she whispered, "they know about the princess." The rogue lowered his head. "They also know. There were twins." Seraphine slowly closed her eyes. When she opened them again, every trace of patience had disappeared. If the diary survived, she walked toward the window overlooking the frozen kingdom. Then there is only one choice left. She smiled, a smile colder than death itself. "Find the second royal child. Before Kael does." A violent snowstorm swept across the northern kingdom. Somewhere beyond those endless white mountains, a man wearing an old silver bracelet looked toward the moon, unaware that the life he had always believed was about to change forever.